students, today we are on lesson 4.1, multiply decimals by powers of 10. Our learning goal today is to multiply. I can multiply decimals by powers of 10, and we are on page 129, so you need your workbook and a pencil. Okay, we are going to go ahead and read through our solve and share, and then I'll have you pause the video, or I'll pause it for you, and try the problem, and then we will work through it together. Javier is helping his parents put up posters in their movie theater. Each poster has a thickness of 12 thousandths inch. So remember, when we have our decimal place, if this is my 0, 0, 1, 2, this is my tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. And then decimal number, and this is your ones place. That's your whole number. Okay, how thick is a stack of 10 posters? 100 posters? 1,000 posters? Solve this video or this problem any way you choose. So pause the video right here and give this problem a try to see if you can come up with 10 posters, 100 posters, and 1,000 posters. Okay, hopefully that you gave it a little bit of a try. I am going to go over a little trick that we can do with multiplying our decimals by powers of 10. So when we multiply our decimal by, or if I'm taking, I'm just gonna fill this in, 12 thousandths times each of these. Well, when we're doing a whole number and we multiply it by, so let's say my example, if I had 12 times 10, I know I'm just gonna add a 0 to that and it becomes 120. But what you don't see here is that you're actually moving over a decimal point that we don't have to put in there. So if this is my 12, right? That's my ones place, my tens place. When I am adding a 0, I'm moving this decimal one spot over, and then I annex or add in a 0 in that missing spot. If I am going to look at this one, I can't just add zeros to that because as we know from topic 2, that's just creating an equivalent decimal. So that won't quite work. So what you're going to end up doing is moving your decimal to the right. There's 1 0, 1 time, 2 zeros, 2 times, or 3 zeros, 3 times. So you always start at the decimal, and we are going to move it to the right 1 and crisscross out the old. So if I did 12 thousandths times 10, I'm going to have 12 hundredths as my answer. And so we've really got like 0, 0, decimal 1, 2, but you don't really have to have both of those zeros in there because that's just a placeholder for your tens place. I do like the 0 before the decimal because it helps you notice where that decimal point is. But it just, everything is shifting over 1. You'll notice my 2 that was in my thousandths place is now in my 100. So our original number looked like, let me line it up, looked like that. So my 2 shifted over 1, my 1 shifted over 1, and my 0 shifted over 1, and then we dropped that extra 0 we had that was in our tens place. And so you'll notice that our number is getting greater by 10, and that makes sense because we multiplied by 10. Now with 100, if you think about it, if I am going to be multiplying by 100, so say I had 12 times 100. Well, you know, you would add 2 zeros to it, right? And we would have 1,200. So you can already start to see that pattern. We have 1 0, 1 0, 2 0, 2 0. So what you really did here is you took the decimal point at the end of the 12 and you moved it over twice when you're multiplying by that 100. So you crisscross out the old and you annex the zeros in there, annex or add. Remember, that's one of our math vocab terms. And we start to see a pattern. So we moved the decimal over 1 time here, got to start at the decimal. And now we have 1, 2, 0. So we're going to move it 1, 2, and put our new decimal in there. So when I multiply this, well, here's the digits I have left. I've got a 0. Remember, we're done with that decimal, so I don't put the decimal in there and then put it in again. We've moved it. It's not there anymore. And I'm going to put, so then you would have your other 0, your 1, your decimal, and your 2. Well, if you're looking at this, we have our ones place filled. So I don't really need those extra 2 zeros before it because that's just a placeholder for my tens place and my hundreds place. So you might be starting to see a pattern. I'm gonna rewrite this so our decimals all lined up. So my 2 went from the thousandths place to the hundredths place, and then hundredths place to the tenths place. And then my 1 traveled from the hundredths to the tenths to the ones. And so everything is shifting over when we multiply it by those greater powers of 10. So our last one, we've got 1, 2, 3 zeros. So if I was to take 12 times 1,000, you know, you would add 3 zeros and you have 12,000. But what you're really doing is 1, 2, 3, kind of the shortcut way of what you're really doing. And we get that 12,000 in there. So if I move this over 3 spots, I have 1, 2, 3, and your decimals at the end, crisscross it out because, man, when you rewrite it, sometimes we get 2 decimals in there, and that's not quite right. So you're going to put our equal sign, and this just equals 12 because you don't need the 0 in the hundredths place or the thousandths place here because there's no value there. You don't have anything. Okay, go ahead and flip over to page 130. I'm going to erase and click over our slide. All right, let's talk over our virtual learning bridge. You can use place value and what you know about whole numbers to multiply decimals by powers of 10. What patterns can you find? So now they're going to bring in exponents. So please remember, we have worked with 10 to the power of 1 a lot, 10 to the power of 2, and 10 to the power of 3. So each of these, 10 to the power of 1, well, that just means 10. It means 110. 10 to the power of 2 is 10 times 10, so that's 100. 10 to the power of 3 is 10 times 10 times 10, so that is 1,000. So what you're noticing is 1, 1 0, 2, 2 zeros, 3, 3 zeros. And so there's that pattern there. Now, what I want you to notice here is what the non-zero digits are doing. So we already knew that when we multiplied 363 by 10 to the power, by 1, it is staying the same. When I multiply by 10 to the power, or 363 times 10 to the power of 1, there we go. This one was just 1, sorry. Then it's going to shift over 1, and we add that 0 at the end, and then all of my 3 shifted over, 6 you can tell is shifting over, and the other 3 is shifting over. And it continues to shift over as we multiply by greater powers of 10. So take a peek at the bottom. Let me erase. Whoopsies. So now they're going to throw a decimal into the mix. They have 363 times 1. Well, that would just be 3.63. And this is a great chart. If you get confused today and you want to look at your hundreds, tenths, ones on here to help map out your number, you can. Or I have that place value chart that I sent home. I think it's in your Avid binder. Okay, so when you multiply by 3 and 63 hundredths by 10 to the power of 1, our numbers are shifting over. And so what you might notice is our 3 was here and it shifted over next to our 6, and it shows how the other digits move. And so a digit in the ones place is worth 10 times more when moved to the place to the left. So when we move it or swoop that decimal, it becomes 10 times greater. And then we have our 100 times greater with 10 to the power of 2 and 10 to the power of 3. So, but what I would really do with this, let's take our 10 to the power of 1. Well, our exponent's a 1. It just means 10. I'm going to swoop it 1 time, new decimal, crisscross out the old. We get our 36 and 3/10. 10 to the power of 2. That means I'm going to move it over 2 times. I'm going to go 1, 2, new decimal, crisscross out the old. And we've got 3, 6, 3. And we've got 10 to the power of 3. So I'm going to move it over 3 times. And I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. Oh, I've got an empty little spot. What could I annex or add in my empty little loop? It's going to be a 0. So now you can copy over 3, 6, 3, 0. So the swooping of the decimals is a little bit of a shortcut, but we definitely talk about how our place value, as we multiply by 10, our place value gets 10 times greater. So the numbers are shifting. My 3 here went to the ones place and then went to the tens place. as we were multiplying by greater powers of 10. Okie dokie. Go ahead and flip over to page 131. We're going to work through a couple of guided practice problems. So for number 1, it says, when multiplying by a power of 10, like 4 and 58/100ths times 10 to the power of 3, how do you know you are moving the decimal in the correct direction? So when I multiply by a whole number by a larger number than 1, the answer always gets larger. So I move the decimal to the right, is what we're really doing there. I just read the answer to us, so we'll go ahead and build that in. I am so sorry. Lucky you guys. Okay. When multiplying by a power of 10, like that, how do you know? So when I multiply, really, it's when you multiply by a whole number, the decimal moves over to the right. So you can pause the video, fill that in there. And the example is if I had 4 and 58/100ths times 10 to the power of 3, I would swoop this to the right. 1, 2, one more spot, 3. I've got that missing, so I put my new decimal here, crisscross out my old, and annex that 0 in there. Because you're multiplying it by 1,000. So everything is shifting over. My 4 traveled from my ones place, it's in the ones place right here, to my thousands place. It's shifted over 3, and just by moving that decimal, that's what you're doing. Okay, we are going to work through 2 of these, and then I'm going to give you 2 to try on your own. Okay, so our first number 2 is 9,000ths times 10. So there is no power here, but we all know that 10 to the power of 1 is just 10, so it's the same thing. Now, when I multiply by 10 normally, I can just add a 0, but that doesn't work anymore because that just creates an equivalent decimal. So what you have to do is take your decimal from this spot, you're going to swoop it over one spot when you multiply by 10, crisscross out the old, and your answer, so 0, 0, decimal, 0, 9. So you don't really need that first 0 in there, and you just get 9/100ths. Let's try another one. 3 and 1/10 times 10 to the power of 3. And sometimes, I like to rewrite that because you just don't quite have enough room for your loop-de's. But if I'm multiplying by 10 to the power of 3, that's like multiplying by 1,000. That's the same thing. So I need to swoop this over 1, 2, 3 spots, crisscross out your old decimal, because when you are showing the multiplication here, this is times 10, times 100, times 1,000, and you annex in your zeros, so your final answer is 3, 1, 0, 0. That wasn't very organized. Okay, so we get 3,100. Go ahead and just try number 5 and wiggle your answer in the box that's going to pop up. And then we will check number 5 in small group and keep talking about multiplying by powers of 10.